what's up everyone? My name is William and today we're going to be going over the Sculpture synthesizer that's included with Logic. First of all, this synth is quite a bit different than some of the other synths we've gone over already, but let's just jump right into it. First of all, this synth can be broken down into three different sections. Starting off, we have right up here, this is the sound engine, this huge gray area here. This is where our sounds will be created. Underneath that, in this blue area, we have this. This is the modulation section where we have our LFOs, we have vibrato, we have some different envelopes we can use, and we have this morph pad here. Underneath that, we have the global control sources at the very bottom here. So that's what that is. One thing about the sound engine though is it actually can be broken down into 5 different subsections. So starting off, right in the center here, we have the string parameters, which this will control our basic timbre of our sound here. Over right left of it, we have the objects here, which this will stimulate the string in the sound that we're creating in some way, depending on the settings that we have. Next, we have some processing parameters. We have this wave shaper right up here. We have this filter at the bottom here. And then we also have a basic ADSR, spreader, and a level. Plus, this has a limiter with it. Next, we have some global parameters, which it'll affect the overall sound. We have right up here, we have the glide, the tuning, warmth, transpose. We have a voices right here. And then we have the keyboard mode that we can change. And of course, we have the pitch bend range right here as well. Moving on though, we have next is some post-processing parameters. We have right up here, we have this delay, this built-in delay that we can use with our sound. And we also have this body EQ down here if we need to do some basic EQing on our sound as well. So let's just go right ahead in it. We're mainly going to be covering the sound engine in this video, because the modulation sections, we've seen some of these before. This one's a little bit more complex, but I think the main thing that's different about this synth is the sound engine and how the sound engine works. So right off the bat, we have the string parameters right here again, and this has a couple different things to it. First of all, we have these view buttons, which right now it's on hide, so we don't see all this extra stuff here. If we go on key scale, we see a bunch of extra sliders appear. And then if we click release, we see just some blue sliders here. And we'll go over that more in depth in a second. But going over some of the sliders that we do have right now that we can see on the sides, we have media loss, resolution, and tension mod. So going over the sliders, first of all, the resolution slider, it determines the maximum number of harmonics contained in our sound here. And moving on to the media loss slider, this actually emulates the amount of string dampening that is caused by the surrounding environment that this synthesizer is simulating. And of course, lastly, we have the tension modulation slider, which will determine the momentary detuning of a sound, of the sound that we're making. So going back to these buttons, the hide button, of course, just hides the different parameters, so we don't accidentally change anything. But moving on, we have the key scale button, which when the key scale button is enabled, the parameters can be set for notes that fall below C3, which is middle C, or notes that are positioned above it. So pretty much what this means is that the impact of these different parameters can be controlled across the keyboard range. So something, if you want the strings to be stiffer at the higher notes and less intense at the low notes, that you could do that with the key scale sliders that appear here. Next, this release button shows our release sliders, which when it's enabled, you can set string release parameters, which affect, of course, the vibrations after the key is released. That's what the release is. That's pretty much it for the string parameters here. We could go more in depth with the key scale, but we're just gonna move on for now because that's something that's more advanced. That would take quite a while to go over. That could be the string parameters could be a whole video on itself. So moving on to the objects section of this synthesizer here. We have 3 objects. As you can see, we have object 1, object 2, and object 3, and they all fairly work the same. And again, these are used to excite or disturb or dampen the sound that's happening. So first of all, we have this this strength knob right here. So we'll just go over object 1 for right now since it's the only one active. And before I change anything, let me just press middle C right here so we can hear what our sound sounds like right now. So that's the basic sound that we got. So first of all, we have this strength knob right here, which determines the intensity of the object. Which is the intensity of the excitement that's happening. And you have to have at least one object active to actually even have a sound. If you don't have an object that's exciting or disturbing our string that we have, then there's going to be no sound. The string is just going to be there. Nothing's going to happen. So moving on, we have the variation slider, which will have the different variations of the sound. Of course, I should have said this first, but this right here is how you turn on and off the objects. You just click on the number. It's actually an on-off button. Next, we have the velocity sensitivity down here. And then we have, of course, our timbre slider right here, which it determines the tonal color that happens. Next, we have this type box right here, which if we click on this, we can see a whole bunch of types come up, which this is just the type of excitement that's going to be happening with our object here. There are different ones. You know, each object has actually unique types happening here. Some of them carry over between, but for the most part, there's some different ones in there. So each object has its own set. So that'll just determine what kind of excitement's happening. So right now we have this impulse type happening. If I change it to something like pick, it's not as exciting. Or if we have bow, that's a lot weirder than what we had before. But you get the idea. That's what the different types do. So moving on to the last thing for this object right here is we have this gate, these gate buttons right here, which we have key on, always, and key off. So gate determines how the object, or when the object is active. Excuse me. Key on means the object will be active when the note is on. I mean, as simple as that. If I'm holding down a key, it's going to be happening. When I let go of a key, it's not going to be happening. Always means it's going to be active as soon as I press the note, so when the note is on, but also when I let go of it, it's going to be active until the release fades away. Until the end of the release phase, the object is going to be activated. Key off means it's not going to get triggered when I press a note down and when it's on. It's going to be triggered actually when you let go of the note, and it's going to stay triggered until the end of the release phase again. So that's what these mean. Object 2 is pretty much the same compared to Object 1. And Object 3 doesn't have this velocity sensitivity slider here. Other than that, though, they're all fairly similar between each other. Once you know one, you should understand all 3 of them. Moving on to this window right here. This is the sculptures, the pickups of sculpture. So the object position sliders, it determines the respective position of where the object will affect the string. Like this, imagine this line being in this string, and this is where you want to affect the string. That's what these sliders affect. Obviously, we don't have 3 or 2 on right now, so there's no orange line when they're off. It's pretty much irrelevant where they are when it's off. Next, we have the pickup positions. This is pickup A position, which it determines the pickup A along the string, which we can change this from values 0 to 1 and anything between that. Same thing with this one, except this is for the pickup B. And of course, we have this invert button, which this will invert the pickup phase for B. So you have to be careful though, because that it can make the sound thinner, because you can have some phasing issues there. I believe that covers everything though for the objects here. Again, we could always go more in depth with this, but it could be a whole video on itself. And again, before I continue to go on, when messing with this stuff, always go through presets, see how some of the factory presets are, and learn from them. You know, see what they did here. Disable some objects on a preset. Be like, oh, which object is making the string sound this way? Things like that. That'll always help you improve everything that you're learning here. So I kind of already went over them, but the global parameters, again, we have the glide time, which will affect the glide, the timing between the notes. The tuning, this is just a fine tuning in cents, which again, 100 cents is a semitone, or equal to 1 semitone. We have a warmth knob here, which it slightly detunes each voice, which just gives it more of an analog sound. A transpose field, which this is used for coarse tuning the entire instrument. The voices over here, which determines the maximum number of voices that can be played at one time. 16 is, I believe, the maximum for this. Yeah, 16 is the maximum for sculpture. Keyboard mode, we have, of course, polyphonic, monophonic, and legato behaviors. That's what these are. And then down here we have the bender range, which we can set the upward and downward pitch bend, this being the upwards, thus it's saying up, and then the downward by default is always linked to the upwards pitch bend range. But of course we can change that to whatever we want. We can change it to our liking. Moving on though to the, I'm going to move over here to the amplitude envelope. So what this is just a basic ADSR for the synthesizer here. We have, you know, attack, decay, sustain, release, and we just have sliders that will affect the attack, decay, sustain, and release for this synthesizer. We have a stereo spreader. We can adjust the pickup, the left and right of the pickup, and then we can also click and drag on key, so we can change the pickup dependent on the key. And what that means, so like, I'm gonna put the pickup at mono. So I'm gonna have everything right in the center. And then I'm gonna spread out this key pickup. So what this is gonna do essentially is the key pickup it affects how balanced between left and right a sound is dependent on the key you're pressing. Middle C will be right in the middle. And then since we have it stretched out all the way like this, a lower note is going to be to the left side of the stereo spread, and a higher note is going to actually be to the right side of the stereo spread. So just to give you an example, I'm going to change this string to a nylon sound, since it'll sound thinner and much cleaner. It'll be easier to hear. Also, I'm going to turn off this delay so that doesn't confuse us at all. So right there, that is our middle C. Oh, excuse me, no, it wasn't. This is our middle C. So right here, we can see, or we can hear, and we can see down here on the level meter right here that the left and right channels are balanced. If we went up one octave to C4, we can see already that there's more on the right side, because over here we have higher notes will be on the right side. Now, if we go one octave below middle C, we can hear and see that the sound is more on the left side. So that's something to keep in mind. We can We can play with the left and right dependent on the keys. So that's something cool that's included in this synth. Next to that, we have a basic level control and a level limiter. Going back, we have this wave shaper up here, which this will determine the shape of the wave. This is an input boost or cut before it goes into the wave shaper. This is the type of wave shaper we can have, and then this is just a variation knob that changes the variation of the wave shape, which it'll sound different depending on which type of wave shaper we're going with. So that's pretty much all there is to the wave shaper. Going down here, we have a basic filter, which we should all be familiar with at this point. We can toggle it on or off by clicking the word, just like we did the wave shaper. And we can adjust the cutoff here, the resonance, and we have a velocity sensitivity knob and a key knob. And of course, at the bottom here, we have 5 buttons that determine which type of filter that we want to work with. Moving on, we have the body EQ right here, though. And with the body EQ, by default, it's on low, mid, high when I have the factory default open. And essentially, all it is just a cut or boost of low, mids, and highs. It's just a basic 3-band EQ. So here's the highs that we can boost and cut. And then actually the mids, we can, of course, boost and cut these as well. But right up here, we have this slider that says mid frequency, which determines where we want our mid frequencies to be located at. So that gives us some more flexibility. If I want the mids to be a little bit lower in the sound or a little bit higher, we can do that and adjust accordingly. There's different models that we can have. The default, again, is low, mid, high. There's a bunch of these other ones. These are a little bit different. They're not standard EQs. They're just different wave shapes that are built into the synthesizer here. And with these knobs, we then have an intensity knob here, which determines the intensity. And then we have a shift, which you have to have some intensity to change the shift. Then we have a stretch knob, which stretches and shrinks depending, and then we have this fine structure that we can determine. All of these other ones have those same parameters. It just depends on what you're using. Low, mid, high is probably what you're going to want to go with on a basic sound that you're working with, though. And then moving on to the last thing that we're going to cover in this video, we have this delay up here, which this delay, it's just a basic delay that's built into the synth. And we can adjust the wet level here, the feedback, how much feedback we want, the X feed. And then right here is also a high cut and low cut, which determines which area of the sound that we want to have delayed. You know, if we want only the really high frequencies, we could do just the higher frequencies, have that delay effect, or so forth. We also have this input balance here, this delay time, which we can click this sync button on or off dependent on if we want it to sync to the BPM or not. And then we also have this output width. And lastly, we have this spread and groove box right here, which spread just determines the stereo spread of the delay, and then the groove it determines what kind of groove the delay has. Whether right in the center, it's going to be pretty standard. Let me just show you. It's a pretty standard groove for the delay. But if I take it all the way to the right, it has a much faster delay, and there's more space in between the delays. The sound we're getting back from the delay. That about sums it up, though, for the sound engine. I know we've covered a lot in this video, and we didn't really go over the mod section as much as we could, but the mod section we've seen before. We have just different LFOs, jitter, vibrato. We have a velocity / note on randomizer, and a controller A and B. These are all things that we've pretty much seen before. That's why I didn't feel that we needed to allocate the time to go in depth in these. We just have different and more in-depth controls over these. The only thing that I want to go over, because I feel like it helps to get better at these synths and things, is we also have a randomizer on this synth, which this determines the intensity of the randomizer, and this button randomizes. So if you're working on a sound and you want to have a different feel to it, you can just click this randomizer. And cycle through some different variations of the sound you're working on. I hope you learned a lot in this video. Thank you for watching. And again, always go through some of the presets, see some of the different sounds they have, see some of the different things that they have in these presets. It'll really help you a lot. See what some of the different objects they have doing, things like that. But thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. See you next time.